Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are going to be taking a look at the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Some of you may have seen my recent video of the Rex Accu-Season package for the sim. During that video we were looking to see what improvements, if any, Accu-Season offered into Microsoft Flight Simulator in terms of seasonal variety. I got many comments after that video suggesting that it would be well worth checking out the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack as well. And so in today's video that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to try as much as possible to keep the format of this video exactly the same as my Accu-Season video. That way of course it should make it easier for you to draw comparisons between the two products. At the end of this video we will do some direct side-by-side comparisons as well between the Accu-Season mod and the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack. So just a quick reminder of the video format. We're going to firstly look at the UI, or in the case of the Bijan Habashi mod, the lack thereof, and we'll look at how we download and install the various features of the pack. After that we'll look at some direct side-by-side comparisons between the sim in its default state and the sim with the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack installed. Worth noting the locations, the weather, the time of the day and indeed the season that we've selected, all identical to the footage that we featured in the Accu-Season review, again to help you draw comparisons between the two products. Finally at the end we'll touch on a few more features of the Bijan Habashi mod that we didn't get to see in today's video, and as I say we'll draw a couple of direct side-by-side comparisons between Accu-Season and the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack. As always guys, I do hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comment section below. The more observant amongst you may notice the sim looking a little bit different here. We've already got the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack installed with the winter texturing. Overall the effect is quite a subtle one, but I think a very nice one. So let's now discuss what the available options are with the mod and how we go about installing it. Okay, so as I alluded to during the introduction, one of the shortfalls unfortunately of the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack currently is the lack of any available user interface or UI. It does make the product a little bit less user friendly, a little bit more clunky to use than Rex Accu-Season. It's also a little bit more work for the user installing the various texture packs for the various seasons. We'll run through that in just a few seconds time, but I think it is worth noting right from the get-go that the lack of user interface is really one of the only shortfalls from the Bijan Habashi mod. Otherwise it's a really nice offering, so don't let the initial shortcomings put you off watching the rest of the review. Anyway, in terms of download and installation, as I said, a little bit of a clunky process. You first have to download 3 separate zip files which you can see on the screen in front of you. Obviously you'll need some sort of application to unzip the downloaded files, and you'll then be left with 3 folders containing all that you'll need to install the mod. We have the 3D trees folder which will add various different 3D trees throughout the Microsoft Flight Simulator world. We have the Bijan terrain masks folder. This is really the trump card of the application currently. It's experimental in nature, but essentially it will add seasonal masking over the terrain, so you'll get more dull, more brownish hues when flying in the autumn and the winter within the sim. And finally we have the season pack itself, of course giving us spring, summer, autumn and winter. As I say, the installation is a little bit more fiddly, certainly a little bit more laborious than the likes of Accu-Season. There's certainly no set and forget option. Essentially you'll install the Bijan mod as you would with most other mods into the sim, placing the textures into your community folder. It's not that tricky to do if you are already familiar with installing into the community folder. Just bear in mind that you will have to do this each time you want to change out the seasonal textures. Of course though, you could make use of a mod manager to help you do that a little bit more easily. Anyway, once you've unzipped your files, all you need to do is copy across the Bijan 3D trees folder into, again, the Sims community folder. Next we'll copy in the terrain masks. Again, these are currently still experimental in nature, so you can expect a few peculiarities from time to time, but they seem to work very well overall. The nomenclature of the packs can take a little bit of getting your head wrapped around. For example, here we have the Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere terrain masks. Essentially the terrain masks offer up autumn and winter textures, so if you want autumn or winter in the Northern Hemisphere, of course apply the Northern Hemisphere pack, and the same goes for the Southern Hemisphere, and once again we just copy that across into our community folder. Lastly we need to select our season pack, which I think is a little bit more self-explanatory. Again, to try and recreate the conditions of our Accu-Season video as closely as possible, we're going to be going for winter textures in the Northern Hemisphere and summer textures in the Southern Hemisphere. So once again we copy those files across into the community folder. We now have the Bijan 4-season pack fully installed and the sim is ready to go. Again, a little bit of work required from the user to install the pack, particularly if you're going to be changing seasons within the sim regularly. Myself, I pretty much always fly with the real world time and season, so in that case you're obviously only going to need to make a change 4 times a year. Again, you can make use of a mod manager to reduce this workload, and overall the process isn't very complex so long as you are familiar with zip files and installing into the community folder. If though you're not particularly computer savvy, then Accu-Season may well be a better option for you. Anyway, now that we've got the mod installed, let's head back into the sim. As I say, all of the conditions will be identical to the Accu-Season flight that we ran in the previous video, so hopefully that should allow you to watch both videos and draw some pretty close comparisons between the two products. So there you go guys, hopefully those side-by-side comparisons gave you a little bit of a feel as to what the Bijan Habashi mod has to offer versus the default sim state. As I say, the effect can be quite subtle, certainly more so than Accu-Season, but overall I think the 4-season pack looks a little bit more authentic, a little bit more realistic perhaps than some of the Accu-Season textures that we saw. Again, the real winner for me is the terrain masking. That certainly makes a huge difference to how the sim looks in terms of seasonal variation. As I mentioned during the introduction, the terrain masking is still experimental in nature, so I have seen a few quirks in the sim whilst running it, particularly around certain water features, specifically rivers, and I've also noticed the odd corrupted texture as well whilst flying around. But those examples are really rather few and far between, and the river issue isn't all that noticeable unless you're really looking for it. Overall, I think the terrain masking is absolutely excellent. Obviously, the main focus of the Bijan Habashi 4-season pack is to add the seasonal variation into the sim, but the pack actually does a whole lot more than that, most of which we didn't get to see in those clips. Again, I chose those clips specifically to align with the Accu-Season review. So we'll just touch briefly now on some of the other features that you get should you purchase the mod. Bijan himself does state that the 4-season pack is an ongoing project, it's always being improved and updated. And many users of the product that I've spoken to as well seem to confirm that the 4-season pack does indeed get a lot of love, care and attention from the developer. It sounds as though Bijan himself is also very interactive with the community, which is really great to see. Anyway, in terms of the additional features with the 4-season pack, it includes over 70 new multi-ecosystems, featuring over 45 trees, shrubs and bushes, which are placed in the world based on native vegetation. You'll also see spring flower blossoms throughout all cities, flower fields for spring in various parts of the UK, Africa, Asia, Europe and the USA, new tree distribution by elevation. You may have noticed that during the introduction and indeed the clip behind us now. Quite a nice feature, the mod will actually remove trees at higher elevations as you would expect to see in the real world. My only slight gripe with that, you can see on occasion that the removal of the trees doesn't actually match up with the features on the ground from the photo imagery. The pack of course also includes the experimental terrain masking. We've discussed that a little bit already. That covers 48 countries around the planet. Another really nice feature, there's new snow masks so that roads and runways will no longer be covered in snow, which is always a little bit of a gripe for me in the sim. Obviously we have the 4 seasons themselves. We also have a variety of new 3D tree models. For example, we have Joshua trees in the Joshua National Park. We have 3D pine trees. There are new blood dragon trees in Yemen as well as bamboo in China. We do also get some 3D winter trees with the vegetation entirely removed, although they're currently only located in small patches and in specific areas. Again, there are a number of other 3D tree models as well as wildflower and flower farms in Amsterdam, Africa and the UK. The package also adjusts the tree size within the sim to bring it closer to the real world. And hundreds of trees have been manually removed from the sim as well to clear up various runways and various airports. So as you can see from that list, the Bijan Habashi mod, really quite a comprehensive offering. It does quite a bit to enhance your Microsoft Flight Simulator experience. Overall, quite a bit more functionality than the Rex Accu-Season mod at the moment, and I do prefer the Bijan Habashi visuals. That being said, Rex are looking to introduce similar sorts of features with their Accu-Season mod at a later date. And again, the main failing of the Bijan Habashi mod, the lack of user interface, Rex there the clear winner. As I mentioned during the introduction, we'll take a very brief look at the two products side by side. Again, we'll just compare the footage of the various flying clips that I showed previously in the video. In the first clip on the left we have the sim in its default state. On the right we have the Accu-Season mod installed. And again, throughout all of these clips we'll be using the same time, the same weather, the same date. Despite my best efforts, however, you will still notice a little bit of difference in lighting between the various clips. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do about that. And of course, to some degree, that is going to affect the visuals between the different texture packs. Accu-Season was set up to install appropriate textures for the 16th of December, so we're fairly deep into winter at this point. Overall, of course, the Accu-Season texture is very much autumnal in terms of nature. You do get some very orangey hues with Accu-Season in general. That, I would say, looks a little bit out of place given the time of the year, although it looks quite nice in autumn within the sim, of course. Moving on to the Bijan Habashi 4 season pack, as I mentioned earlier, obviously a much more subtle change in terms of colouring within the sim. Actually, in terms of the tree canopy, it's almost indistinguishable, but the trees themselves do seem to be a little bit more brown. I wouldn't say that the trees look particularly wintry, but again, that terrain masking does make the whole sim feel more autumnal or more wintry in nature. And the same is true really with our United States example. Again, on the left we have the sim in its default state. On the right we have Accu-Season installed. The tree textures there looking quite a bit nicer in terms of colouring, much more subtle in terms of the orangey hue on the foliage. And whilst again we do still have plenty of leaf coverage in the winter, that seems to be a sim limitation. I think the colouring of the trees here is actually quite nice. But without those terrain masks, obviously the grass is still fairly emerald green, and that does look a little bit odd juxtaposed with the autumnal trees there. With the Bijan Habashi 4 season pack installed, however, you can see the sim overall looking much more gloomy. The trees actually fairly green still, not particularly wintry looking, but with those terrain masks, obviously the grass has a lot less colour to it. Overall the sim does feel much more cool in terms of colouring, and I would say much more wintry. Anyway, with all that done, hopefully you now have a pretty good idea what the Bijan Habashi mod has to offer. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I would say overall if you're looking at visuals, the Bijan Habashi mod, the fairly clear winner there. If you're looking at a user-friendly interface, then by all means Rex Accu-Season probably the better product. Once again, it is worth noting as well, Rex reportedly planning to include all of the same features at a later date. So if you are willing to take Rex at their word, take a little bit of a punt on the product, then Accu-Season may be every bit as good at a later date. Anyway guys, once again I do hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, then please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. As ever, a huge thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support, very much appreciated. And lastly, a very big thank you to JamCat12, a channel viewer who was kind enough to purchase the Bijan Habashi 4 season pack for myself and the channel as a little bit of a Christmas present. I hope all of you are having a great day wherever you are, take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.